Today we're gonna tell you what this has to do with the Christmas story. We're starting a brand new. I can't even talk. We're starting a brand new. This is beyond creepy. Okay. We're starting a brand new series today called "How to Have the Worst Christmas Ever," and we asked these guys to come to do that. And so what does that have to do with the Christmas story? Why would we do that? And here's what we want to talk about. We're going to talk about, here's what I know as a pastor. For the last 7 years of this church, I've done this Christmas story 7 different ways. And here's what you get: Mary, Joseph, wise men, and shepherds. And maybe a star every now and then. And then you go shepherds, wise men, Mary, Joseph, and that's the order you get. So 7 times you get to do the same story over and over and over again. And how do you do it different? And this year, for the first time, because of you guys, we thought of a different way to do this, and that is the Christmas story, the villain edition. And that's what we're going to look at this year. So I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about the villains in the Christmas story. And you might be wondering, why would you want to talk about villains? Why would you want to tell us how to have the worst Christmas ever? And the truth is this, is some of us, we don't realize it, but we have a plan and a script we're following. The villains in the Christmas story had a script that they were following. And some of us are following that same script, and we're saying we want the best Christmas ever, but the truth is we're following the script for the worst Christmas ever. And we're going to tell you about it because you could change some things in your life, and this is going to be absolutely awesome. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this. They're going to come back. They're going to give you some photo ops maybe today or next week. Are y'all going to stay dressed like this the whole time or just next week? Next week, they'll be here for photo ops, and so that's great. So if you could thank them. Can we thank them today? And now you guys can flee. I'm just playing. You can leave us, and we're glad. So thank you guys very much. That was one of the weirder things we've done. But anyway, there you go. So, so how to have the worst Christmas ever. Some lessons from the villains of the Christmas stories what we're going to look at. And today I'm very excited to talk about a character that I really didn't know much about until this week. And then I found out a whole bunch of stuff about this character that I want to share with you. And that is King Herod. Today we're going to talk about lessons from a king. His name is Herod. And so what I want to do is maybe you've heard of him in the Christmas story, maybe you haven't, and we're going to show you where that's at in the Christmas story today. But I want to give you a little bit of background on this king who was king over Judea during the time of Jesus Christ when he was born. And so let me tell you a little bit about King Herod. One, he didn't necessarily come from Israel. He got appointed there. And so he came at a time in the world. Now we're going to do just a little bit of a history lesson. So if you don't like history, I don't know what to tell you. My wife doesn't like it, so she was like, John, abbreviate, because I like history and she doesn't, and it's a whole different thing. So I get very excited about these things. So anyway, I get to share these things. So today, Herod came at a time when Israel and the entire world was ruled by the Roman Empire. That's where he comes in. And during his time, Rome was in kind of an upheaval because they were having problems in the Senate. Imagine this, the Senate, that they were supposedly a republic democracy or in some ways or whatever, and they were a republic. They had a Senate, but the Senate was a little bit corrupt. And so they had a general who said, I'm going to get this all straight, and that was Julius Caesar, if you know who Julius Caesar is. And so he comes, Herod's, in his lifetime, Julius Caesar was there, and the Senate has things. And so they had appointed Herod to be the king over Judea for a reason. He was a very political animal, and so they knew, hey, if we have him there, we know we can get what we want because he's all about his own personal power, and he was. And so they appointed him to Israel or Judea, and the reason is because it's the gateway to the Middle East. So they knew we have to have somebody there that we own, a puppet, a vassal king that will do whatever we tell him to do, and that's pretty much who he was. But don't underestimate him. He had to do a lot of political maneuvering to become king over Israel. His family wasn't king before. There was another empire there. And if you Google about King Herod, which of course everything online is true, so you can just know that. But if you looked up history or Wikipedia or whatever, you can find out that King Herod he had to do all kinds of maneuvering to become king over Israel, and he did. And so he got to be that. They liked him. He had a lot of aspirations. He had a lot of ambition. And then something happened. Julius Caesar decided that he didn't like what the Senate was doing. They were too corrupt. So he did what Roman soldiers were not supposed to do, and he crossed the Rubicon and came in and took over the Senate, took over Rome, for that matter. And then he tried to work it out with the Senate. Now, there's a lot of controversy as to whether that was good or bad or indifferent, but that's what he tried to do. And he thought, hey, I have friends in the Senate. We're all brothers. And so they stabbed him to death on the Senate steps. If you didn't know, that's kind of gross, great Christmas story, huh? And he died on the Senate steps. And then the people that were closest to him were very angry. So there was two very powerful men that were very upset, and they decided to execute all the people that tried to kill Julius Caesar. One of them was his nephew named Octavian, and the other one was Mark Antony, who was married. You guys know who Mark Antony was married to? Anybody? Man, you guys had an education. Let's go. Okay, so he was married to Cleopatra, and so. But how many people think after what happened was these two prominent men, they went after the enemies, and so as long as they had enemies, it was okay. But then these two men rose to power. Now we have a conflict. We got two people in charge of Rome. Anybody think that's going to work? It doesn't. And guess what? Then they turned on each other. And now all of a sudden Rome was divided. You had to choose, and you might be thinking, what does this have to do? It had a lot to do with Herod. So what happened to Herod was the Senate had appointed him to be king. And you got to think, a local government guy, if you know anybody who does local politics, understand what they're about. Their power in their local area. That's all they care about. And so he, because of his political ties, had backed Mark Antony. And if you know about history, then you know Octavian was a much smarter person than Mark Antony. He had a lot more influence than Mark Antony, and he basically beat Mark Antony. And anyone that had taken Mark Antony's side was now due, like any of the vassal kings who had sided with Mark Antony, guess what they were going to do? They were going to kill you. Because in those days, they didn't believe in like, hey, you just got to do that and then you get to live. No, if you took the wrong side, you lose everything you have and will probably kill you as well. And so, unfortunately, King Herod had picked the wrong side. And so he did something politically savvy. What he did was he went to a place called Rhodes, and he approached Octavian. Now, Octavian became Caesar Augustus. I don't know if you knew that. And so with Julius Caesar, we get the month of July, and with Caesar Augustus, we get the month of August. I don't know, that's just some side notes. And but anyway, he comes to him, and it could have meant his death, but he's so politically savvy, and he had such a great speech that Octavian said, hey, I will keep you in charge. And he promised him, he said, look, I will be loyal to you just like I was with Mark Antony. And he put him in charge of not only Israel, but he understood that Israel is the gateway to the Middle East. And so King Herod became an extraordinarily powerful man in that area, in regions. And so that was a big deal to him. For whatever reason, that was his main goal in life, was his personal power. And so he backed Octavian, and Octavian gave him the power to pretty much do anything he wanted to do in his region. I want to make sure you understand that, so you understand this piece of the Christmas story. So King Herod, if you fast forward, what he ended up doing was he did do some amazing things. In fact, they called him Herod the Great for a reason. He built an unbelievable amount of things. He got funding for it. He was very smart. He had a lot of ambition, but not only ambition, but a lot of sense about him. And he was an incredible builder. He built most of the Second Temple. At least he finished it off. Some of the ruins for that still stand there today. If you go, you'll see ruins from King Herod even after the Romans came in and decimated Israel. There's still the Western Wall. I think he built part of that. He built a lot of incredible things, including aqueducts and all kinds of things. So you can search that out for yourself. But he was also, you would think that after he went through all of that, it would make him grateful for what he had. But that's not exactly the route that he went. Instead, as he became older, he wanted to keep his power. I don't know if you ever met anybody like that. The more he had, the more he wanted. But not only did he want it, but he was very paranoid about anyone else getting what he had. So he was a tyrant king. He ended up being a tyrant that said, I will basically do anything to continue my legacy. Don't think of his legacy, though, as family, because maybe that's what you're thinking about. I'm setting this all up for my family. No, he used his family to get what he wanted. And if you study about King Herod, you'll find there was nothing he wouldn't do to improve his condition, including he got married 10 times. He sounds like a lot of modern-day politicians, right? One thing that might separate him from modern-day politicians, he would also kill his wives if he didn't like them. He didn't divorce them, he just killed them. And he killed them mostly not because he just didn't love them or they did something to irritate him. He did it because, hey, I need a different wife and you're in the way, and he would just kill off that person. He did the same thing to his sons. If he had a son that wasn't politically expedient to keep around, he would just murder his sons. Now, that's the kind of person you're talking about. And he had to do an unbelievable amount of things. I have no idea what he faced in his lifetime, but he saw the world taken over by Rome. I believe in his lifetime or shortly before, he saw Rome take over Israel. So he had seen some things. He had been part of things. I have no doubt in my mind he probably had an unbelievable amount of post-traumatic stress in his life. And he was ruled by one thing: I have to keep what I have. And he was able to maneuver through 3 different huge changes in the Roman Empire. And now he's seated in power. And so if we fast forward to today about the Christmas story, we find Herod, and he's in his 70s. And he's honestly dying. He has a kidney problem, and he's dying in a very painful way. In other words, it's a slow process that he had, and whatever it was that he had was so painful that it would make you want to kill yourself. And that's where he was at. And it didn't make him closer to his family. It just made him super paranoid, and that's who he was. And everybody knew, whatever you do not irritate King Herod. Why? Because he had the backing of Octavian. He had the backing of Caesar Augustus. And so he said, hey, he could do anything he wanted, so he had absolute power. And by the way, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's absolutely where he was. And so that's where we pick up today's story that's found in the book of Matthew. Maybe you didn't know that. Matthew chapter 2 and verse 1, it says this: after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. Now you know kind of the background of King Herod. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. So Jesus was born. And they asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. We'll pause right here just for a minute. So basically, what we have is we have a 70-year-old king sitting on the throne, and these men come from the far east. Now, it's believed with the Magi, and I won't get into all that today, that somehow they knew of a prophecy of Messiah or a king that was going to be born, and they also understood how to interpret the stars. Now, there's only one other person I know that did those kind of things hundreds of years before, and that was Daniel, who was there and left the Septuagint and all that, and so that's a whole study of itself. I'll stop there. But that's where they came from. And they came and they said, look, we know about the prophecy of a king that was going to be born. And if you read the book of Daniel, you'll know that he almost listed it to the year that the Christ was to be born. They could have figured out at least what his life would have been. And so these guys came. No one else in Israel was looking. We'll talk more about that next Sunday. But nobody else was looking. And King Herod heard this. Now let me ask you a question. For everybody else, when you read the Christmas story, and if you want to read it this week, Luke chapter 1 and 2 and Matthew chapter 1 and 2 is the Christmas story. 4 chapters, and you can read the whole story. Everybody you talk about, and every time we ever talk about it, the Christmas story is full of hope and life. And even though Mary and Joseph, it was kind of a crazy story, they were excited, right? The shepherds were excited. The wise men were excited. Guess who wasn't excited? King Herod. Why? Because that would have meant, what? Who did you say? You said the one that was born king in Israel? That's the 2 words you don't want to put together, right? Because there's only one thing I live for. I am the king of Israel. That's it. That's all you need to know. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about your prophecies. By the way, King Herod was not a Jew. He did not care about Judaism. Now, he converted because he understood politically it was necessary for him. And the Sanhedrin had went after him several times for his immoral lifestyle, and then they kind of stopped when Octavian said, you can do anything you want. So they kind of said, yeah, we just kind of don't want to mess with that. And so they didn't. So he was not truly a Jew. He just was there. And so when he heard 2 words that he never wanted to hear, which was, there's a baby who has been born king of the Jews. Think about how paranoid that must be. 2-year-old baby. You're talking about a baby. You're 70 years old, you're about to die. Why do you care? But he does. Because anything that's a threat, he is going to eliminate. The other thing I see is this, he's 70. Can I tell you something about people? Just because you get older doesn't necessarily mean you get nicer. Do you know that? A lot of people think that. A lot of people think, when I get to that age, then it won't be that way, and time doesn't heal all wounds, and time doesn't make things better necessarily. It's what you do with time that makes it better, and some of the meanest people I know, they get meaner as they get older. I don't know if you know that, because they hold on to more. Just a thought. Because I thought, hey, when I get to this age, I might be better, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes we're worse. And some of the worst things that we can do may be at the end of life, and by the way, I believe that to be true of King Herod. So I want you to see how the story unfolds. Okay, verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Can you circle that? This is something worth watching out for. When someone is disturbed at good news, that is an indicator, okay? If you get disturbed by good news, that should tell you something about you. If somebody tells you something awesome and you feel bad about it, if somebody tells you something awesome and instead of celebrating, it disturbs you, that should tell you something. Now, let me tell you something about King Herod. Here's how I knew how much power he had. Not only was King Herod disturbed, now he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything bad. He didn't say anything negative. They just knew. They knew as soon as they heard the words king and Jews, they knew, oh my gosh, Herod's going to go apoplectic. And he was sitting there, and on the surface, he probably looked just as calm as could be. But underneath, like a duck, the water was just churning all over the place. And all Jerusalem with him. You see that? All Jerusalem with him. Everybody around him was disturbed. When you are like King Herod, everybody else around you will be disturbed too. Some of you guys got some people coming for Christmas. When they're there, everybody's disturbed around them. Is that true? Okay, you get the picture. Okay, anyway. Holidays don't always bring out the best. Okay, verse 7. We'll skip down to verse 7. So the Magi came and they said all these things, and so what Herod did next was he was disturbed. He had never cared about Jewish history in his life. Let me tell you, he really didn't care. He didn't know anything about it. He didn't even know about Messiah because he asked them, he said, well, let me ask you a question, religious rulers. This is where the Sanhedrin comes in, right? Hey, guys, can you come here? What are they talking about? What prophecy is that? Nobody was looking. Nobody knew. And so they went out and they read it. And you can read this for yourself in Matthew 2 if you read it this week. And they went out and they read it and they come back to him and say, oh, here it is. He's born in, Bethlehem. Now, that don't mean much to you. It's like, basically, Bethlehem was like this, okay? We make it sound better because we say, hey, it's the city of David. But Bethlehem is kind of a podunk town in the middle of nowhere. It's basically like this. If you were to come to our area, we would say Virginia Beach or Norfolk. So if somebody says, hey, where do you live? What do you say, right? You say Virginia Beach or Norfolk. You know what you don't say? You've heard that before, huh? Okay, gotcha. You knew where I was going. Bethlehem was like that. I don't even have to say it. That's sad. That's really sad. I got to get new material. Okay. I might have meant, you don't know. I could have said Windsor or something. Okay. Matthew 2, verse 7. Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them. So he finds out about the prophecy, then he goes to them, and he doesn't do it with everybody else. He does it secretly. Now, the Bible didn't have to say this. It didn't tell a lot about this, but it spent the time to tell you a certain word, and I want you to circle it today because it is huge. Secretly. When somebody wants to meet with you secretly, I'm not talking about having discretion. But when there's a lot of, I don't want anybody else to know what's going on, I don't think we better tell anybody else, let me tell you something, you're only as sick as your secrets. That's a fact. And this man had all kinds of secrets. You know how he came into power? Because he knew how to do secrets. He knew how to use secrets against people. He knew how to manipulate circumstances. He knew how to do it. You get the idea? And that's him, secrets. And he found out the exact time the star appeared. Now, you know the saddest part about this whole thing? Out of all the scriptures they had, they would have known where the Christ would be born. No one was there. The Christ had been born, by the way, and I know this is going to ruin the Christmas story, but the Christ in this story, this is not Bethlehem like the manger scene. This is Bethlehem 2 years later as they're still trying to pay their taxes. That's how difficult, I know none of us can understand tax laws that are so difficult that it takes 2 years to figure them out. Okay. Sorry. But that's where they are. They're still in Bethlehem trying to pay their taxes, and that's where they are. And so they're still there, and so they're going to try to find them, and they're still there. And he's like, okay, so there's the star, and there they are. And so they're going to go and try to find these people. And Herod's like, I want to know. He's the only one in Israel trying to seek him out. But guess why he's trying to seek him out? He don't care about Jesus, right? We'll skip down a couple verses. I'll share with the next part. So what happens next? He sent them to Bethlehem, and he said, go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find out with him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. I don't even think I need to tell you about the sarcasm there, right? I mean, like, I don't think anybody, even the wise men were creeped out like, wow, that's weird. It's creepy. You secretly call us in, you want to know, you're finding out all these prophecies, and you're pinpointing, and he did the math and was like, I want to know the exact time that he's born so I know how old he would be. And so they leave and they go and they worship the Christ, and you can read about that on your own. An incredible story. And then as they leave, an angel comes to them and warns them, don't go back to Herod. And I think they kind of said, yeah, we kind of know, right? I mean, like, we got it. He was really weird. skip down a few more verses, and here's what happens with King Herod. This is the part I want you to focus on for this Christmas story. When Herod realized he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. You want to circle something? And he did what? And he ordered to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and in its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. This guy was super focused, wasn't he? Super brutal. He was furious. His focus wasn't on what he had. His focus was on somebody else might take what I have. I'm so worried about a 2-year-old. Now understand, you got to look at it from Herod's perspective. Herod had his whole 70-year-old life, he had fought and done things that are unspeakable to keep a position of greatness, and he accomplished it in his lifetime. He became Herod the Great. He came from nothing and became Herod the Great. That's who he was. It's an amazing story. It's an American story. And he had rose to prominence, and he had done all the things, and he accomplished everything, and now I've got to keep what I have. I've got to keep what I have. And that threatens me. And he wouldn't think twice about flipping the switch to say, they got to go. Whatever stands in my way, I've got to get rid of it. And that's exactly what he did. And he's like, up to the place where he said, he just sent a detachment and said, I'll tell you what, I don't even need to go down there. Just kill everybody that's 2 years old and under. That's about how old he would be. So he goes to Bethlehem. And they find all the male children, and they kill them. This isn't new, by the way, for them. Hey, the soldiers had done stuff like this for Herod before. If you read about history, this isn't a new thing for him. And Bethlehem isn't a large place, so to be quite honest, there's not that many babies in Bethlehem. I mean, like, we all think it's going to be this huge thing. But let's just be honest. How many babies were born in Zuni? Well, I mean, some of you guys, right? I mean, like, I don't know what happened 9 months ago, but we have all kinds of babies being born this year. But in Bethlehem, I don't think there was all that many babies, but they went and they found them and they killed them all. How sick is that, right? To do one thing, to keep me in power just a little bit longer, to make sure. Here's the thing. The baby Jesus, he knew, hey, look, I'm 70 years old. I'm on my way out. This has nothing to do with I'm afraid that he's going to challenge me for the throne. It has everything to do that says I do not want a Messiah that's going to be written beside my name in the history books. That's all this has to do with. I don't know if you know that. That's exactly what it has to do with. The reason King Herod was mad wasn't because Jesus would assume the throne, because he had no plan for himself after he left the throne. His thing was only about his life and his lifetime, but here's what he wanted. I want greatness. I want to be remembered, and here's the problem. If he is Messiah, that's going to be what's remembered, not me. And so he killed, thinking, I killed the baby Jesus. We'll skip down a couple verses because the Bible includes this in it. After Herod died, maybe I can fill in some blanks here. Herod died, if you research this, he died so horribly. Here's how he died. He was having this kidney problem and all kinds of other problems, and he was in so much pain that he had a detachment that guarded him. Octavian sent a detachment that guarded him to keep him safe from anybody that would try to kill him, including himself. He tried to commit suicide so many times, and the guards would stop him, and finally they think that Herod probably killed himself. That's probably how he died. But before he died, he knew he was dying. He did something very strange. What he did was he said, hey, nobody's going to mourn my death because I've been so brutal. You know, I've had to assume power in such a horrible way. So what I want you to do is go out and select some prominent people that everybody loves. And on the day of my death, I want you to murder them in front of everybody, and then there'll be mourning in Israel for me. How sad is that, right? That's sick, right? But that's how he was. And believe me, there are people that are like that are so consumed with self. Okay. And after he died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, and he said, get up and take the child and his mother and go back to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. Understand, right before this, before King Herod had died and he sent the detachment to kill him, an angel had warned Joseph, and they fled to Egypt. Now, let me just be honest with you. Jesus didn't need protection, okay? Just so you know. I mean, Jesus is the Son of God. I mean, if God wanted, he has his right-hand angel is Michael the archangel who leads a legion of angels. I don't think he would have a problem destroying everyone in Israel, including the Roman Empire, and changing the world if that's what he wanted to do. That wasn't his plan. So he wasn't that Jesus was afraid, okay? I just want to make sure. He didn't escape Herod like he was scared he was going to die. That's not going to happen. But here's the big thing. Herod had his moment. He killed all the children. He thought Jesus was dead. And his big thing was, how will I be remembered? I want to be remembered as Herod the Great. And I have a feeling that today I probably informed you, I don't know, but I would guess because to be quite honest, until this past week, I never really studied him out much. I didn't know that much about him. The only thing I knew was he has a small footnote in the story of Jesus Christ. Guess how he's remembered? A footnote in the story of Jesus Christ. I just want that to wash over you this morning, because you might not be getting what I got out of this story this week. That after all that Herod had done with his life, you have no idea what this man sacrificed to get to where he was. The things that he did, the things that he had to do to himself to accomplish what he accomplished in his lifetime is unbelievable, the sacrifice this man made. Yet, when he died, the only thing he's remembered for is a villain and a footnote in the story of Jesus Christ. He didn't stop it, and he's not even remembered. He's only remembered for this. That's sad, right? You know what it tells me? You got to be careful what you're giving your life to. There's several things I see about Herod, and today we're just going to kind of unpack just a few of them. And the reason why I want to do it is because he is such an incredible character that we go, man, we would have a hard time saying, man, I'm like Herod, right? I don't think most of us would want to say we're like him. Yet, there's a few pieces of his life that while we might not have the magnitude that he has, hopefully, that we're out murdering people and killing our kids and those kinds of things, but the same thing that drives him drives some of us. And the truth of the matter is we hear message after message about how to have the best Christmas ever, but the truth is that our plan is how to have the worst Christmas ever, not just the worst Christmas, but the worst life ever. And if you follow Herod's plan, you will have the worst life ever. If you follow that script, you will have the worst life ever. And some of us, we're not doing it at the magnitude, but we're following some of these things on a very small scale, and that's what's driving your life, and you've never even had a chance to think about it. You don't realize it because it's part of our culture to do certain things like he's doing. And so what I want you to do today is this. I'm simply going to talk through some of the qualities that he had, and there's 4 of them that I want us to look at today. They're not new, and we're not going to unpack them in detail. So if you look at those and you go, you know what, I really need to research this further. We did a message series a few years ago called Rescued, and we talked about each one of these in detail. And so if there's anything you want to do with that. But what I want to do today is I basically just want to go over them very quickly. And what I want you to do is I just want you to put a check mark. If there's one that you struggle with, I just want you to be honest with yourself and check it and say, you know what? This Christmas, the best thing I could do is deal with that. Figure out how to overcome this in my life. I believe God has a plan to help you overcome some of these things so that you don't end up like this. By the way, Herod was not a threat to Jesus. Can I tell you something? Neither are you, okay? But Jesus wants you to be part of his story. Herod could have been part of Jesus' story in a different way, but he wasn't. You could. It's not a question of what God will do. God's going to do what God does, with or without you, with or without me. But the question is which side do you want to end up on? And so what I want you to do is I simply want you to look at it. If you don't want the worst Christmas ever, I want you to look at some of these things. So I want to tell you what the things are first, and then we'll go through each one of them. The first one is greed, or the first one is guilt. The second one is anger. The third one is greed, and the last one is jealousy. And I want to tell you something. They're going to be the hardest things in the world to admit that you have a problem with. So I'm going to kind of introduce them to you, and I just want you maybe to write just a few notes and say, you know what, maybe I do. Maybe ask your spouse and say, do I struggle? Maybe don't ask your spouse, find somebody else. But ask somebody and say, hey, do I struggle with this? Because if you do, you're going to be going down a path and you're going to think you're going to be trying to have the best life ever, but instead, what you're actually doing is you're following a script for the worst life ever. And you're going to do all kinds of things, and you're going to sacrifice all kinds of things to have this incredible life, and you're going to find out at the end that it's actually the worst life. And you're going to end up going, man, I wasted a life and I'm a footnote on the wrong side. Okay, so the first one is this, guilt. We'll start with guilt. I believe it was a driving factor in the life of Herod. That whatever he did, I have a feeling that it pricked his conscience. And here's why I say that. Some of the most ruthless people are some of the people that feel the most guilt. You might not know it because they're trying to hide it. Here's how you can know if you're a guilty person. If you're being driven by guilt. If you have a secret that you don't want anyone else to know. You know, there's a reason why we use the word secret with the life of Herod, where I ask you to circle the word secret. If you have a secret that you don't want anybody else to know, it could be a secret shame from the past. It could be something, but if anyone gets close to my secret, it's something I did, I don't want anyone to know about this. What happens is if somebody gets close to it, you'll get the gamut of emotions. You may not even realize that's what's going on. But typically, when you get close to somebody and they shut you down, there's something they don't want you to know. And a lot of times it's fight or flight. It's going, hey, I'll do whatever it takes. And then next thing you know, you'll be like, man, I don't have a relationship with that person anymore. What's going on? Because there's something behind the surface, a secret shame, a secret sin, something that's never been dealt with. I think that was true for Herod. So I want you to think about it. Is that me? When people try to get close to me, am I detached? Do I only let people get so far? I'm not talking about opening and spilling your guts to everybody because that's silly. That's no discretion. But what I'm talking about is there anybody that really knows you? Is there anybody you've really ever shared the real stuff in your life? Have you ever sat down with anybody with a fearless moral inventory and went through it and really shared with them what's really going on in your life? Or do you keep that all to yourself and all bottled up? That's where Herod was. The Bible says you can't truly be free if that's where you are. So if you're struggling with that, maybe just put a check mark. Yeah, I think I do. What's the solution? The solution is this, is 1 John 1:9, you can write this down. It says, if you confess your sins, he's faithful and just to forgive you your sins and purify you from all unrighteousness. That's what God's promise is. That the first step is confessing it to God. But in the book of James, it also says, James chapter 5, it says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. That's the person that prays for you. That it's saying, hey, don't keep that stuff to yourself. You need a physical person that you can share it with. And here's a scripture you can take a look at today. That confessing, and by the way, this may be the greatest gift of Christmas you could ever get. Because some of us have been running from our past so long, and we have so many secrets. And you're only as sick as your secrets. And what I would challenge you with today is this. If you go, you know what I have in my life? I have this overwhelming sense of guilt. Or this overwhelming sense of shame. Somebody did something to me or I did something and I feel so much guilt. You need to find a trusted person and allow that to come out. Allow yourself to unpack the bags. What I want you to do today, though, I just want to be clear. I'm not asking you to do that today. So I want you to relax. What I'm asking you to do today is I'm just asking you to be honest today. This is going to take a process. If it was easy, you'd already done it, right? Herod didn't turn into Herod overnight, and he ain't going to change overnight. And so what we're going to try to tell you today is this, is I'm not asking you to do all this today. All I'm asking you to do is identify it today. Just be a little bit honest with yourself. Just give God a little bit of room and actually put a check mark. You know what? I think I might have a problem with guilt. Okay? Don't start into, I got to go talk to somebody right away. You may not be ready for that yet. Just put a little check mark and say, you know what I got to do? I just got to be honest. I think I'm being driven by guilt. It's a bad place to be. He had all four of these. If you have more of them, that's okay too, but just put a check mark by the ones that are maybe something for you, okay? Number 2, anger. I don't think it was hard to say that I believe Herod was driven by anger. Do you agree with that? And I think a lot of it is you don't know all the things that happened to him in his lifetime. And I believe that he probably had a sense that, when you feel guilty, it's because you owe somebody else. And a person that's guilty will try to avoid you because they're going, hey, if you let somebody borrow money, what happens? They try to avoid you, right? It's like, I don't want to see that person. So I avoid you because I owe you. If I'm angry, though, you know why I avoid you? I don't avoid you, right? I'm trying to get you because you owe me. That's what anger is. Anger is, there is a debt. Something's happened. You hurt me. You did something to me. I am the victim in this circumstance. You did this to me, and I am so angry. And a person that's driven by anger and an anger that becomes uncontrollable, what happens? They're able to do things, and I believe it's one of the driving factors in the life of Herod, is that he was able to say, he justified because he said, you don't know what's happened in my past, and I had to do this, right? A lot of us say that. That person did that, and I had every right to do that. And And we live a very angry life. And for some of us, we've learned that revenge isn't enough and that person dying isn't enough and all these things aren't enough because nothing can quench this fire except for one thing that Jesus taught. And it's this. You're not going to like it, by the way. If you're angry, I just want you to do a small test. Think of the person that you might be angry about, okay? You might say, think of that person that you say, when somebody asks you and you say, it doesn't bother me anymore. Can I tell you the biggest lie that Christians tell? Just a side note. You go to them and you say, hey, how's that going with it? Oh, no, I've already dealt with that. I'm good. Biggest lie we ever tell. I can tell you how you know. An hour later, you're still talking about that person. I'm sorry, you're not done yet, okay? Yeah, it just doesn't bother me anymore, but let me tell you my rant for the next hour. If that's where you're at, if you start ranting, it's a good idea that you have an anger problem. If you have a forgiveness, you've never forgiven that person, I'm telling you, you're holding on to that stuff. I know. How do I know? Because I do it, right? If you're driving down the road and that person comes to mind and you're winning the argument in your head, you might have an anger problem, okay? I'm just telling you. Or here's the thing. Maybe you don't say anything to anybody. Maybe you're much more disguised than that. Some of us have figured out how to hide some of that. And so what we do is this. You see that person, and it takes you almost an entire day to calm down just from seeing them, just from hearing their name. You might have an anger problem. You want to have the worst Christmas ever? I'm telling you. Right? You ever had angry people at Christmas? Okay. We won't go there. So what do I do? Because they owe me. And the key is found in this verse, and I don't want to use the word until we talk about why we can do it. If you're angry, it's basically like you're drinking poison and you're expecting the other person to die. I got to tell you, I've seen people that have died, and it still didn't fix me. I still get angry at the thought of certain people, right? And they're dead and gone, and they're gone, and they can't even come back, and they can't even do anything else. And nothing is enough to quench the anger. I think that's what happened to Herod. Somewhere along the line, he got hurt. And you owe me, and he justified killing his children and killing his wives, and all of a sudden you become the monster. You have no idea. It's how you become the villain. You know, most villains have been abused at some point in their life. Did you know? Hurting people hurt people. I don't know if you knew that. And the only key isn't to hurt someone else or somebody else to hurt it. It's to stop the cycle, and God understood it. And so in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, I just want you to have this so you can consider it. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Sorry. You're telling this to an angry person? That's such a joke, right? Be kind and compassionate to each other. It makes me sick. Until I see this next part. Forgiving each other. That verse did make me sick. Until this. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. You know, the day that changed my life was the day I heard a pastor say, you know, Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins. But you know what else? He died on the cross for their sins too. And I didn't understand it. I was like, well, so? They still hurt me. I didn't do anything as bad as they did. No, you're not understanding. Jesus Christ paid for that sin. And it's as though Jesus stands in front of you. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you may want to be one after I tell you what's next. He says, it's as though Jesus is standing in front of you and he's saying, let me ask you a question. For you to forgive, I know how angry you are. I felt it, I know. Because on the cross, I paid for that. On the cross, I felt that. I felt that sin. I felt that pain. Is this enough for you to forgive? I'll tell you what I learned. If this ain't enough, if Jesus Christ isn't enough, there is nothing else. But let me tell you something. He is enough. He is enough. And the greatest gift you could give is to forgive. Okay, I'm just telling you. It is the greatest gift that you could ever have. So if that's you today, if you go, you know what, when you said those things, I do that when I'm driving down the street, right? You're not ready to forgive yet. That's okay. Just put a check mark and say, you know what, I got to consider this. I got to think about that this season. I really do. Okay? You guys need to listen a little bit faster. All right, so number three, greed. Greed. Last Sunday we talked about greed, so I won't get all into that today, but greed is simply this, the assumption that everything is for my consumption. Greed is this, is that, hey, greed is all about, hey, I need more. I can't fill more. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever had an addiction problem, and I believe that I have, you can't fill the void. It doesn't matter. It's like for an alcoholic, how much do you drink that's enough? There's not enough. How much Krispy Kreme is enough? Okay, that's a whole different thing. Just one more. Okay. Get the picture? How much pornography, how much stuff, how much sex, how much stuff, how much whatever, and you fill and you fill and you fill, and you can't fill it enough. And God gives the key. And I just gave one verse, but I just thought this was interesting. He said each one of you should give what you've decided to give in your heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Because why? Because God loves a cheerful giver. You know who's not cheerful? A greedy person. Let me tell you something. If there's one thing I understand about our country, and I love our country. I just want to be 100% clear. I love many things about our country, but we are fueled by one thing that's not very good sometimes, and that is the need to just get a little bit more. And while it may be good for an economy, it is horrible for a person. It's horrible for a person. And what it means is that what I want you to think about is am I fueled by greed? Maybe you're not quite as bad as King Herod. Maybe you got some good reasons, but let me ask you a question. As a family, what do you give? Or are you holding it all to yourself? I'm not talking about giving to the church today. I want to keep that separate because otherwise that would be very self-serving, and that's not what this is about. What we're simply saying is I'm not even talking about just money. What I'm talking about is when you look at your calendar for this Christmas season, is it all about events that would be good for you? Or are you doing anything for someone else besides us four and no more? Just think about that for a minute. Because if you want to overcome greed, the key is giving. So I just want you to look at your checkbook. I want you to look at where you're spending your stuff. And if it's all being consumed and you're going, hey, maybe it's even worse, just like for me, where I know I've dealt with that in my life, where it went even further and it went, I want to consume so much that I have to get consumer debt because I want more. I want more than I can afford. And I want you just to think for a second and look at the pictures of the world and think about that we are the richest people in the history of the mankind, and yet we don't have enough. And the key is not more. The key is giving. If you give, it will take care of your problem with greed because you can't give and be greedy at the same time. And it happens slowly because what happens with greed is this, is it's not going to feel normal to give because you're going, I want. But when you start to give, all of a sudden it's like this weight comes off. I don't know how to describe it other than to do it. And when you give, all of a sudden it's like you start to laugh and you start to be cheerful because it's like all that stuff that was so important, you're like, that don't matter no more. And you start to not care so much about that stuff. You start to not be so obsessed. It's God's clear thing. God loves a cheerful giver. He loves cheerful people. And he understands the only way to do that isn't to be greedy, but to give. And so just wanted to throw that out there. So if you struggle with greed, just put a little check mark there, okay? The last one is this. This is the hardest one to admit to. Jealousy. Ooh. Anybody jealous today? No. I won't ask you to raise your hand because nobody would, right? Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You know anybody that's jealous? Just point them out. Just point at them right now. I'm just playing. It's the worst, right? Because if somebody says you're jealous, then you just don't know what to do with that. It's like, now I feel funny, right? Because it's like, I didn't want to say it, now I did, and now I don't know how to take it back, and I don't know what to do with that because it's like, being jealous is just such a weird thing. Jealousy says this, I not only want I want more. It's not about greed. Jealousy is, I see what you have, and now I feel bad. It's like, I could have felt good about what I had, but now I can't. And I've used this example before, but it just came to me right now because he's sitting on the front row, and I just like to pick on him. But when I drove up in my new Honda, and it wasn't new, and then Rolly drives up in his Porsche, I didn't want him to be part of my family anymore. I just want to tell you right then. I'm just playing. I'm messing with you. And he still didn't give me a ride in it. I'm really upset. I'm just saying. Just feel bad. He won't let me drive it. I'm just playing. I'm joking with you. I'm playing with you. Right? But all joking aside, some of us, that's where we're at, right? Somebody's got something, and it's the ugliest thing in the world. And the problem is this, is you're trying to deal with it before you identify it. And all I'm asking you today is this. If that's your script, be honest with it. Are you jealous? When you think of another person, are you happy? When you hear the story, think of King Herod. You know what King Herod's problem was? He was not happy about the Christmas story because he was jealous of Jesus. Not because Herod wanted to be Messiah, because he was thinking how it would affect, you talk about the height of narcissism. He didn't think he was Messiah. He said, I'll kill Messiah so they'll remember me and not Messiah. Let me tell you what changes jealousy. Now, let me ask you, that sounds so sick that you go, oh, I wouldn't do that. Well, let me ask you a question. Anybody got a promotion at your work and you go, I know how they got that. Have you ever secretly celebrated somebody else's failures? The Redskins lost this week. Some of you guys were very hurtful. I'm just should have stood for the flag. Okay, I'm done. All right, I'm done. Jealous, right? I mean, like, and you have to make a comment. It's like, hey, you can give a compliment and then you withdraw it as fast as you can. That tells you if you have a jealousy problem, because it's very hard to admit, right? If you can't give a sincere compliment, you probably have a problem here. Just put a little check mark. And the way you break the back of jealousy, the way you change jealousy is one thing and one thing alone: you celebrate. Because a jealous person truly cannot celebrate. And it's not just by words. Be careful. Because King Herod could lie, right? Oh, I want to go worship the baby Jesus. There's some people that raise their hands and they sing the worship songs, and your prayer didn't get past the ceiling because you were so consumed with that, and you're going, how do I get rid of it? And the truth is there's only one way, and it's to celebrate. And you can read about it in the story of the prodigal son, where it represents God, and there's this son that's forgiven, and then the older brother's jealous because he's going, he's getting attention. God must not love me. You got more than one kid? It happens, right? I mean, you got your favorite? The one that's easier to love? No. Anyway, the older brother comes, and what does he say? But we had to be glad and celebrate. Right? He wasn't mad at him. He's like, you need to come and celebrate your brother, and that's going to make you better. God understood the solution. The solution is celebrating. We had to be glad and celebrate because this brother of yours was dead, and now he's alive again. He's lost, and now he's found. If you're jealous, you know how you break it? You celebrate. I just want you to think about those things this Christmas. And I know it's kind of maybe a weird series to have, but as I looked at it, I thought, you know what? The truth of the matter is this isn't new material, so go back to Rescued if you want to delve into it further. But here's what I know. The thing is that you could look at this stuff that we talked about today, and you could just go, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. Why don't we focus on the happy parts? Because here's what I know. The greatest gift that you could have is if you chose to overcome one of these things in your life. Let me say something. On the other side of confession is a joy that you can't believe, that people could accept you for who you really are. You don't, and I know there's people in this room that think if you ever knew who I really was, you would never love me. I'm telling you, we've put that to the test, and I'm telling you, there's not much that you could say that God wouldn't still love you. By the way, there's nothing you could say that God wouldn't still love you. And there's not much you would say that we wouldn't still love you. I'm just playing. We would love you. Because God loves us and God loves you. And if you confess, I'm telling you, it would change your life. Some of you, you're holding on to anger so tight, and you think that you don't have a choice because Satan has lied to you and said you have the right, and unfortunately, you are shackled to that hate. And some of the people that you hate are dead and gone, and you're still hating. And the greatest gift you could have this Christmas is to finally forgive and to have somebody maybe help you with a process of forgiveness so that you could finally be free and have the joy that God wants in your life. The only day that's better than the day that Christ forgave my sins was the day he taught me to forgive, and he came back into my life, and I'm telling you, you want some of that, believe me. And I'm telling you, greed, there's not enough in the world. Giving is far better than getting. And the last one is jealousy. If you learn how to celebrate other people, I'm telling you, God will show up. And if you take a step towards God, he will take a step towards you. So what I want you to do is I just want you to take that list and look over it, and maybe you'll get the greatest gift this Christmas if you overcome some of those things. If you don't, you ignore it, and you go, I have that problem, but I don't want to deal with it. I have that problem, but I don't want to talk about it right now. I have that problem, but I'm going to put it off. You're going to have the worst Christmas ever and possibly the worst life ever. If you don't believe it, Google King Herod. So last thing I want to do, and then we'll be done, and that's this. I want to give you one baby step that you could do today to start the process. So what I want you to do is this. I want you to just think, hey, what are we going to do this Christmas as a family? Your family, your family might just be you. That's okay. Just think about, what am I doing? With what God has given me, some of us he's given a lot, and some of us he's given a little. It seems like he's given more of us a little than a lot, right? That's relative, depends on where you are. But whether you have a lot of money or you don't have a lot of money, I just want you to look at what you do have, and I want you to think about, am I consuming it all? And if I am, maybe you need to sit down today, and I'm catching you at a great time because this is December 3rd, and you got 22 days before Christmas, and maybe before you sit down and before you buy the gifts, because some of us have waited, some of you guys already got them, or maybe you need to give something that you have, and you need to think about, could I give to somebody else? Could I help somebody else? Could I serve somebody else? Because it's going to unlock something in you. I'm telling you something. If you do this, If you were to give a little, if you were not to consume it all for yourself, and you were to just say, hey, out of this portion that I have, I'm just going to take some of what I would spend on me or my family, and we're going to give that. Maybe even bring your kids around it and say, hey, you know what? What do you think we ought to do? And we can give you many ideas, but I just want you to think about that. Maybe you're here today and you go, you know what? And I've been here, so I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I don't have $1 to my name. And for some of us, we go, I don't have $1 to my name, and it's my fault. Okay, that's okay. God still loves you. Okay. Then what I want you to do is, what can you do with your time? Who could you do something for? Who could you call, right? Maybe you need to celebrate somebody. I don't know. Maybe you need to write a thank you note. Maybe you need to write a Christmas card. Maybe something to get outside yourself, but somebody told you that you're a victim and that you can't help nobody because you have no money. I don't remember Jesus being rich, and I certainly didn't remember his apostles being rich. And most of the time they would say things like, silver and gold we do not have. But we heal people, and we do things, and we help people. We invited people over for dinner, but the little bit we do have, we shared. And I'm telling you, if you did it, it's going to unlock something in your life, and you're not going to have the worst Christmas. You're going to have a great life, and you're going to introduce something into your life. And the thing is this, what I found is as you take a step towards God, I would like to say he takes a step towards you, but he's already there, okay? So here's one idea, and I'm not saying you need to do this one. We're not checking or anything like that. In fact, we're asking that you do the work if you want to do it. So here's one idea for your family if you need it. And we just thought it would be good this time of year. We have missionaries maybe you didn't even know, and this is a great time to bring them up. I don't want to get into details about some of them. Some of them work with New Tribes Missions, and they're all over the world, and I've just remembered that we're on a broadcast, and so if I say the name, some of these people could be killed and kicked out of the country and these kinds of things. So on the back of your flyer is all the people that we support as missionaries and how to give to them if you want to. And if you don't have money, you can call them up and say, hey, what could I do to support your ministry? And I'm not telling you which one you need to be passionate about. You may find an area that you go, hey, I want to help those people. I want to help these people. I want to help people that aren't even part of the church. You know, A21 or A29 it helps, sex trafficking in the world and do incredible work with that. There's all kinds of World Vision. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Maybe just call social services. I don't know if you knew that. You could. And they're looking for people to help. But most people just don't want to get involved. Salvation Army, you name it, you decide what you want to do, but I just thought, hey, we'll start with the people that we already support. Maybe you didn't know we did. We have 5 missionaries in our church, and I think 4 of them are listed on that page, and just call one of them and say, hey, you know what, our family taught, our family prayed, we want to do something small, you know what I mean? Maybe do something anonymous. One ministry I want to highlight today before we leave is we support a ministry called Military Ministries, and I'm going to ask Barbara to come up just so you can see who she is, and yep. And Barbara Peak is a great friend. She's been part of the church since we started. We knew her several years before we started the church. And she works for an organization, or when I say works, she's a missionary, which means she raises funds to do what she does. She works for Cru Military Ministries, which is a division of Campus Crusade for Christ, which is now called Cru. I don't know. I hate it when people change names, but that's, sorry. Branding is so hard. Okay. But they have done an incredible work. I had a cousin that was saved and discipled through Campus Crusade for Christ. Bill Bright started that, and we've been very affected by the work of Bill Bright. And he had a vision that he'd be able to reach people on college campuses, and then he extended that vision into several other ministries, one of them being Cru Military Ministries. And I wanted to mention it today for a couple reasons. One is because I didn't even know some people might not even know it exists. And it's the headquarters for Cru Military Ministries is right in Newport News. And Barbara works there, and they have an international ministry around the world. Now, what Cru Military Ministries is able to do is they have a lot of military that's part of them. They have a large base of funding that helps them do things that other people can't do. Things like they're able to support chaplains. They're able to go to war zones even and pass out Bibles. They're able to be there to share Christ with soldiers that are going into combat for the very first time. They're able to support them after they come home. They're able to help them find, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people return in the military with post-traumatic stress, and they need help. And they help partner with a lot of organizations that provide counseling and provide incredible resources and help fund them. Another division of Campus Crusade for Life is Family Life, and they offer conferences, things like Art of Marriage, and they partner that with the military so that a lot of military people, and you might not know this, and I know Barbara would want you to know, is that they can go to conferences for free, that they pay for them to go. So if you know somebody in the military and you want that for them, she has these resources, and I want to make sure you know about it. The other thing I wanted to do is this, is you may be praying and you go, you know what? I want to help a military family. This would be an incredible way to do that. Or you may say, hey, you know what? I don't have any money. Anybody? Sorry. And they have all kinds of areas to volunteer as well. And so you can go over there and you can pack. They have these deployment kits that they have Bibles and things, and they need people to stack them. You can go over to Cru Military Ministries anytime, and they have prayer walls with all the prayer requests for everything that's going on in the military. And I just want to make sure you guys, one, knew about it, and two, there's nobody better to support in the world than Barbara Peake, because what you don't realize is all the work that has to happen behind the scenes. So she supports so many missionaries that are there in our country and abroad and international militaries that they help. And Barbara is the backbone behind that. And you guys might not even realize what an asset we have right here. So I just want to make sure you guys knew it. Her information is on there. But what I would rather have happen, because we're not that big yet, is that come talk to her, please. Because what I see is somebody is going to have the heart to help somebody, and it's going to be a great connection. So it's not about how much. It's about that God can take the little bit that we have and do incredible things. So don't get stuck in greed. Don't get stuck in anger. Don't get stuck in jealousy. But this year, start by taking one step towards God, and I guarantee you He'll change your life. Is there anything you want to say?
No, except I'll be in the lobby afterwards, and I have some brochures, and if you want to know more, I'd be glad to involve you or let you know more about what we're doing.
Great.
It's huge. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, can I pray for you today? Let's stand for prayer.